everyone, it's Pat from Pat Dev Music, and today we're talking about my 5 favorite soundtracks, but we're not going to need the guitar for that, so let's get rid of that. I think every artist should listen to soundtrack music. If you're a painter, you should have it on the background. All those subliminal sort of intervals and different colors, will come to mind, I think, through your work. But if you're a musician, it's so important, I think, that you listen to soundtracks. So let's say you love pop music or jazz or rock or metal. You'll be so used to those particular tones, those frequencies, those particular chord progressions, those different interval arrangements. But when you listen to a film score with a symphony or an orchestra or even just a 5-piece, there's so much more interesting and detailed because they have to go along with the emotions that represent in the film. So it's going to be so much more detailed. I'm going to show you my 5 different movies and soundtracks, and I'm going to play little snippets. Now, unfortunately, if they do get cut out because of licensing or whatever, I don't know, I'll leave a comment below with where you could listen to them, but just 30 seconds of each of those. Now, the first one, this is going to shock a lot of you. It's actually a film that's just come out and it is so good. It's called Baby Driver. I've seen it twice already. I'm about to see it a 3rd time because the music is so good. Now, how they use the music in the film is it's amazing. The cast had little wireless headphones that they were listening to. So every time you see a car open, a coffee cup gets put down, a door gets opened, they're bank robbers, so they put up a mask. Anytime you see any of that, the cast is doing it with the beat of the music. So they're listening to the music, waiting for those beats to do it, and then in the editing suite, the music is put on the top. It's so cool. The entire film is like that, and it really creates this amazing feel. And I didn't know that going in the first time. I just knew that the movie felt really well edited and just had this really cool vibe to it. Having learnt that, I had to go back and see it again, and blew my mind. Now, the reason why the soundtrack is so cool is because there are so many different classic artists. Here is a list here. I'm sure you've seen or heard of some of these songs before, but overall the movie ties them in so well. And I just personally haven't listened to this music in probably a good 5-10 years. Any of this music, I don't know, I think I've been more of a modern music kick. So going back to these old classics, so good and really refreshing for my ears. Now, with all the other soundtracks, I do actually own the movie and the soundtrack, but with Baby Driver, it just came out, so I don't own that movie yet. But next is Oblivion. So we are checking out the soundtrack from Oblivion, which was done by M83. Fantastic soundtrack, really cool sort of vibes and synthy vibes from the 80s mixed with orchestration. The final track, I think he had maybe 2 drummers playing at the same time, performing. They could see each other and performing at the same time, and really builds up the intensity. That's the clip that I'll play. I think it's a fantastic movie as well. I think Tom Cruise sort of went away for a little while, came back with this movie. Fantastic sci-fi, lots of throwbacks to 80s sci-fi movies. But the soundtrack by M83 really lifts it up a notch, and I always listen to it for inspiration. Next is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is The Revenant. So good. This is the 4K version, and the detail and everything is just stunning. What really makes this film special visually is that I think 90% of the film or something like that was shot in natural light. So they would hike out for hours at a time into the wilderness, and they would have to hope and pray that it wasn't a cloudy day so they could get as much light as possible. And with cameras, if you haven't heard of this before, so with cameras, these days cameras are amazing. The sensors are so good, but it's the best when you have as much natural light in as possible, so the sensor doesn't have to work as hard, the film is less grainy, and ultimately just looks so good. So this soundtrack is by a Mr. Sakamoto. Really ambient, a lot of rhythmic sounds, tribal sounds, suits sort of the theme of the movie. I'll play a little clip now, but again, really refreshing to the ears to listen to something like this, and if you've seen the movie, really haunting theme sort of going on as well. And the last two, we have Inception. Again, one of my all-time favorite movies by Christopher Nolan. Huge fan of Christopher Nolan. And music by Hans Zimmer. Now, what's really cool about the music is I find that it works with the film incredibly well. So it's a lot of industrial vibes, a lot of synthy sort of vibes. But the overall, my favorite piece is this piece called Time. This huge orchestration, really just based off 4 chords, but just keeps building. Starts off really slowly with just piano, builds with strings, then finally a horn section, guitar. Oh, it's so good. I'm gonna play a little clip from that. Highly recommend just sitting down and listening to the soundtrack, or listening to the soundtrack on the go. Certainly a lot more up-tempo than the last movie, but highly recommend. Let's check that out. And finally, another Christopher Nolan movie, Interstellar. This is the sort of special version there. What's really excited, I love, my high definition, my 4K. What's really exciting for me is Christopher Nolan is sitting in the studio, probably maybe right now. He's going through all of his old Batman films. He did the Dark Knight series, and then he's going to go through Interstellar, and they're going to release proper 4K versions. And the look and the depth is amazing. But we're getting away from the soundtrack. Soundtrack was done by the same person that did Inception and Gladiator. It was Hans Zimmer again. Fantastic soundtrack, really. I love the sort of harp and piano sort of vibes at the start in that corn chase scene. And overall, again, I think it's the whole sort of sci-fi genre, as you can see from my movie choices, that I'm really drawn to, because it's something really different. I don't listen to a lot of sort of synth-esque music generally, unless it's a soundtrack. But that's it. Those are my 5 soundtracks. Highly recommend you checking them out. In the description below is a link to each of the soundtracks you can just listen to for free on YouTube if you want to check them out. Highly recommend, if you do like them, checking them out on Apple Music, Spotify, that sort of thing. Tell me about your soundtracks. Do you listen to soundtracks? Will you listen to soundtracks after this video? Do you have some favorites? Let me know. And as always, if you've made it to the end, thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you all again. Bye.